All right, so good afternoon, and thank you for coming out to Progress Next. You all enjoying your time so far? Yeah? Awesome. All right, so 45 minutes is actually not much time, so I'm going to go a little fast. I'm going to try to show you as many things as I can in 45 minutes, trying to get you an overview. The slides aren't important. You can have the slides, and most of the demos are pretty much online out of the box. So let's talk about what bots in particular can do for you. So my name is Sam Basu. I am a developer advocate. I mostly come from the Telerik side of the family with Progress. So a lot of .NET, a little bit of JavaScript, and we do a lot of UI for .NET across web, desktop, and mobile. And you will see that kind of chatbots is something that does stretch across just about every platform. If you are on Twitter or any kind of social media, that's me. Also on Skype or GitHub, that's my social handle for just about everything. So if you need to get hold of me after this, that's where you can find me. So let's talk about chatbots in particular. The problem with bots is it's confusing. You hear a lot of different things, right? How do you start building one? And maybe the more important question is, why should you build one, right? Everyone talks about bots, and like if it's your birthday and someone shows up at the door to say, go make yourself a cake, here are all the ingredients. That's not very fun, right? But that's kind of what we are at. There are so many ingredients into what goes into a bot, and we are confused as to how to build them and what it can actually do for you. So let's try to break it down first. So what exactly is a bot? A bot is essentially an application that does something concrete, right? Most of us have, or we are using a lot of bots in our everyday lives. I'm sure you have smartphones with Siri or Google or whatever else that you're using. At home, you might have Alexa, you might have Google Home. Now, do you think those are bots? How many of you think those are bots? Yeah, well, they're sort of bots, but they're kind of the front end. They're kind of agents. A bot is something that actually does something like make a reservation or create a calendar invite. A bot is the thing that actually does the work, and you can have lots of different UI, lots of different agents that are sitting in front of the bot. So a bot is essentially an application. It's a web-based application that does something concrete. It doesn't need to always run in the cloud. It can run on-prem, but it needs to do something, and it needs to be able to mimic a human conversation as far as possible. I mean, we all kind of know that we're not talking to a human, but as far as possible. So the good user experience is important. For me in particular, I kind of started looking into bots. I think it was 2016. Microsoft had its Build conference, and Satya Nadella got up on stage and he said, conversation as a platform, that's a thing. And maybe it was a little ahead of times, but I mean, things have evolved a lot in the last couple of years. So it's a new canvas. It's a new way for you to engage your users and kind of meet your customers where they are at. They don't need to download a new thing. They don't need to use a new app. You can just meet them wherever you are. So it's much more personal and much more interactive. The benefits are obvious. You get a lot of nicer way to reach out to your customers. And coming up, folks, there are lots of seats up front. So it's much more engaging. You get to expose your products on channels that the user may not always be using your stuff. You get to improve your customer experience. And for you and your business, the benefit is cost cutting, right? A lot of the times when we talk about chatbots, we see these like nebulous demos, right? I think Google I/O in one of their keynotes, they had a thing where you started talking to a bot, it made a reservation for you for your haircutting appointment and did a whole bunch of things. And you wonder, like, what's in it? What's in this for me? Why should I build a bot? So for enterprises, it is cost cutting, right? And just for context, I'm going to show you some of the things that we have done with chatbot and UI in particular. So we actually work with a hospital. And if you look at physicians and their calendars, if the calendars are in sync, getting an appointment with a physician should be fairly automated. And that was a workflow we kind of started building up. And over time, and nobody's trying to get rid of humans, but we are trying to put a little bit of buffer. So before you get to a call center person, there's a little bit of help that can be automated. So anything and everything that you can think about automating in your enterprise, in your field of work, anything that can be automated, this is where a bot can come in. And it can do a lot of different things. It can integrate with a lot of different systems. So this is what bots are. Conversational bots in particular. I'm not talking about bots that walk. I'm not talking about the Roomba robots that wipe your floor. I'm talking about conversational bots, chat bots. So they are apps, and in particular, they are web apps. They essentially live as web apps. They're hosted somewhere, and they have integrations into different types of channels, which we'll talk about. They should have a delightful UX. I mean, I can kind of tell that I'm not talking to a human, but it shouldn't be so apparent. It should be a little bit of a proactive conversation, if possible. And this is important, intelligent, right? So bots can be pretty dumb. It's up to us developers to make them a little smarter so they can actually do things. They can work with you. They can be intelligent in the conversations they have. They can understand you better. So that's up to us to see how intelligent we can make our bots. So let's talk about how you kind of get started with conversational bots and what you can build with it. So there's a lot you can do by yourself. Again, given that bots are essentially a web apps, you can go build it all yourself. It's just you're going to rediscover the wheel, and you're going to do things that people have already done many times over. So it really helps to start with a bot framework. So all of these are very popular bot frameworks. They're made by Microsoft and Google and Facebook and Amazon. IBM Watson was the big thing that was like Jeopardy games that they did a few years back. So these are all bot frameworks that help developers build bots, right? They give you the starting point. They give you the SDK. They give you the tools. They give you the integration with the different channels, so you don't have to do all of it by yourself. You can just focus on building the app's functionality and what your bot is supposed to do. Anyone played with any of these things? Okay, which one? Okay, yeah. So I was going to say, like, if you are into any of these other things, I have done a little bit of Lex, but almost everything that I show you will be on the bot framework because it's easy to get started as a .NET developer. But the good thing is, I mean, if you want to go into Facebook or Lex, the concepts are exactly the same. The UX and the ideas are exactly the same. So pick something and then start there. So let's talk about bots on the Microsoft stack. We at Telerik, with all of our .NET and JavaScript tooling, this is what we are pretty excited about, and I'll show you some demos. So on the Microsoft stack, you get a couple of different things. So first is the bot builder. This is how you build your bots. So you go to GitHub and you get the SDKs, you get the tools. There is an emulator, which helps you kind of test your bot. So you get all of those things, you start building, and then there's a developer portal, which is optional for you to use, but that's where you can publish your bot. That's what gets you access to all the different channels. But you can also host it yourself if you want. And then I'll talk about cognitive services. That's the intelligence part of it. This is the Azure or the intelligence part of it, which makes bots understand you a little better and do things that are fun. So let's talk about building bots locally and how you would get started, right? So this is where I would start. So they have a site called dev.botframework.com. They actually have really good documentation on just about everything. So start there. Notice how they say download the SDK from GitHub, or you can also start on Azure. But check out their documentation. They kind of walk you through exactly what a bot is, what are the different integration points, what's the UX like, what's the UI that you're supposed to build, and all of that. So the question is, how do you actually build it? In what language? What programming language? So .NET, C#, you can actually do some F# as well, but pretty much all things .NET you can do. You can also do JavaScript, right? So JavaScript will run on Node.js. So you can host it either as a .NET web app or on Node.js. And they have a new version of Bot Framework that came out a few months back. They have preview support for Java and Python, right? So those are the 4 things that you get with Bot Framework. So if you started here and you got the SDKs, this is how just a hello world thing works. So let me show you. I'm here on my folder. I'm going to pull up a little command line here. This will be the JavaScript side of things, and then I'll show you .NET. Right, so I already have the tools installed, so I can do, how many of you know about Yeoman? Yeoman is a scaffolding tool that helps you create projects easily. So the bot builder itself comes as a scaffolding tool. So you just say, yo, bot builder. It's kind of like hipster talk. Yo, do this and do that. Not builder. Sorry. Okay. So let's do yo, bot builder. All right, so it's going to ask you a few questions because we are literally going through the SDK now. What's your bot's name? So let's call it the next bot. What will your bot do? The thing that you start out with bots always is echo, right? It needs to just repeat back what you said. So intelligent. JavaScript or TypeScript? So let's do JavaScript. You can do a couple of different options here. Let's do echo bot. Everything looks good. You say yes, and that's it. So it's going to spin up a project for you and give you all of the dependencies that you need to start building your bot. And it also gave you a few tools, which we'll look at. Give it a second. It is actually doing an npm install over the Wi-Fi, but it should have most things cached. So it's done. All right, so now we are going to go into that bot. So it's called, the folder itself is called nextbot, which you see right down here. Right, so if I go in here and if I do an npm, because again it's node, npm start, it's saying, hey, I'm listening to you at this port. Now notice this is a web application, but I should not just pull up my web browser because it's not meant to be talking to me through a web browser. So what I do instead is pull up this little guy. It's called the Bot Framework Emulator. This is also something that you get from GitHub when you install the tools. So if I go in here, that's the default URL that it was on. And it's saying, hey, I'm up. There are some conversation updates because you joined this chat room. So if I say hello, ta-da, it says you said hello, right? So just one quick turn of me saying something and the bot coming back with something, right? So it'll just literally echo what you said. So this, what you see, is the Bot Framework Emulator. It's actually nice. It lets you see the log. You can inspect what's going on every HTTP request back and out. And you can kind of muck with things in the middle if you want to do things. You can save a conversation. So this is pretty nice. So that's kind of the hello world of playing with bots. So let's stop this and let's look at the same thing from Windows and a .NET standpoint. Geez, time flies. 15 minutes already in, huh? Joe is, where is Joe? He's standing in the back or outside the room. He's going to kick me out at 3:30. So I will try to be quick. Okay, Windows. I still have old Visual Studio on this virtual machine. But for the developers in the room and for those of you who work with other developers in your teams, this is what they will kind of play around with. Come on, Visual Studio, wake up. Okay, so if I go File and New, and if I go Project, so notice how it shows up as an Azure bot service because it's kind of an Azure tooling, but it has nothing to do with Azure. You can just host it anywhere. So you get the same templates just inside of Visual Studio now, except instead of JavaScript, you get it in .NET. So I can create an Echo bot right here, and it'll do exactly the same project structure, except done in .NET versus JavaScript, right? So you can start with .NET or you can start with Node.js. So exact same project structure, and you get the emulator on the Windows side of things, which is exactly the same. So that's how you kind of get started. Go to GitHub, get the SDK, and start there. But again, the documentation is really, really good. So any questions so far before we move on? Okay. Next, let's talk about this other thing. Azure, because again, Microsoft wants you to have everything in Azure because that's what sells. And Azure actually makes a really convincing case for running your bots on Azure because they can give you all of the tools which we talked about, but they also give you some nice templates. You can have the channel support is very important because again, the big functionality of bots is how else can you deploy it? It's going to be the same code base that you just want to deploy it to as many channels as you can because that's how you're going to meet your customers. So the channel support is really nice. Of course, it's scalable, so you can control the elasticity of it, how much usage you're getting, and then you can do other things like serverless functions and DevOps and so on. So on the Azure stack, if I look at how you go about this on Azure, so this is my Azure dashboard. How many of you use Azure? Okay, some of you. So this is the Microsoft Azure dashboard. Other cloud providers will give you a similar experience. So in here, I go New, and I go AI Machine Learning, and Web App Bot. it's not really AI what we're doing, but you can actually do a lot of AI with it. So in here, you kind of start with a bot name and you give it some subscription. Over here are some templates, right? So this one here, notice it's using the latest V4. But if I go back to V3, I get a few more templates. Like there is a basic chat bot, there's a form bot, there's a language understanding Q&A bot, proactive bot. So you get a fair number of things to play around with. So I already have a bot. So let's hit OK, and I'm going to come out here. This is the exact same bot that was created locally on JavaScript, on .NET, same exact code. So here, if I come down here and do a test in web chat, okay, so it's up. If you can see the bottom, it's hard to see, but I can say hola, and if it's up, see, it says, you said hola, right? Down at the bottom, right? So same exact web chat that I saw. But the good thing with this web chat is this is a little embeddable thing. So if you have a web application, you can just like plug this in and it's going to work irrespective of the rest of your web app. Now, what's nice about this is if I go in here and go look at build, notice how it lets you download the bot source code, which is exactly what Visual Studio or the Yo tooling will create. You can get the emulator. Or I can say open in online code editor, which, let's go in here. How many of you use VS Code? Yeah, some of you? VS Code is a very popular lightweight code editor. This is essentially VS Code running in the browser. So you can change your code right here. This is the code that Visual Studio generates. So whenever there is a, bless you, whenever there is a message received, essentially you say, you said this. That's just the one line of code that's firing all of these bots, right? So you can edit this code in the browser or you can download it and play around with it. Now, the other thing that Azure gives you are these support for these channels, right? These channels are really what lights up your bots because I can meet your users wherever they are at. So Slack, Skype, Teams, GroupMe, Kik, you name it. It's all there. So Skype. So these are things, again, the same app can be running in different channels. So if I pull up my Skype real quick, I may not have logged in a while. Okay, so see that? This is the Echo bot.
I have a question. Maybe this is the wrong direction, but okay, the way I'm thinking as a developer, I want my program to end. Is there a way for it to stop? Like you say exit or...
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Let me get to it. Yes. So this is all you can stuff that you can define. Exactly. I mean, the bot will do exactly what you will define it to do, right? So you get the bot on Skype, and then for the sake of time, I'm maybe not going to show you the other things, but one other fun demo that I do is with Twilio. Twilio is a company that does a lot of like voice and networking and IMs very well. So anytime you are like kind of driving by and you see those like huge billboards like text this to this number, there's a bot behind it. Nobody's like manually texting it, right? So you can have the same bot respond over text, right? So the Echo bot can just respond over text. So these are all pretty nice things. Okay, so let's go back and let's see where we're at. 306. So we talked about some of the channels. The channels is what helps your bot be everywhere. So Cortana is a channel. Siri isn't exactly a channel, but you can put a bot is essentially a RESTful endpoint. So you can have Siri or Alexa trigger the bot behind the scenes. And then Slack, Messenger, for everything else, it's kind of built in. This guy is important. This guy is direct line, and you don't hear a lot about it because it's kind of behind the scenes. So all of this is kind of RESTful endpoint. It's a facade towards accessing the bot, except for this guy. This guy gives you direct access to the bot over a straight RESTful service. So if you had to integrate your bot into an application and you don't want to use any of these channels, you just want it to be in your desktop app or your mobile app, use direct line. And that's something you can use over .NET and JavaScript. And you can also, with direct line, with your device or your web browser, you can actually establish a kind of a network layer, WebSockets layer connection with the bot. So it's just much more quicker response time with the bot. So direct line is it's actually very nice. Okay, so let's talk about some of the UX parts of it. So we looked at just a Hello World Echo bot so far. These are some of the things that bots do to kind of have a conversation with you, right? Because it needs to be a conversation. So text messages, media, buttons, prompts, cards, dialogues are important because, again, as users, we are impatient. We don't like typing a whole lot, especially on mobile phones. So if you can just have the user just tap on something and get out, that's just much more quicker. So this is where some of these conversational pieces really shine. So let me show you this. Let's go back here to my Visual Studio. And I'm going to maybe start with this guy. All right, so this one, I'm just going to run it. And I'm going to get to your question in just a second, ma'am. Sorry, my Visual Studio is running a little slow. Okay, so you see I hit F5 and it says your bot is up, but that's just a URL. Go play around with it in the emulator. So I'm going to pick up the emulator here, not the terminal. I meant this guy. So when you create a project, it drops a file in your project called .bot, and you can just like double click on the bot. So that's just a quicker way to get to it rather than just picking up the URL every time. So this is my picker bot. And notice it does a couple of things. So this one here, we joined the chat room, but we actually didn't have to say anything. It's saying right out of the bat, welcome, I can help with something. So that's just a welcome message without me saying anything. And it also kind of posted a dummy picture. And then it's saying, what's your favorite color? And instead of me having to type, it gave me some buttons, which is nice. So I can just click on that, and it says yellow, looks like that's the best color. And then what's your favorite color? So this is kind of a chat conversation. So it is giving me a picker. It's doing that one turn, and beyond that, it's done. It is dumb, and it doesn't know what to do next. So it just kind of goes back to the top of the logic and just repeats the same thing over and over, right? So just a quick way of showing you some pickers. The code here is super simple. If I can show you in just a second. So the way you welcome people to your bot is, notice how I just have a welcome text here. Everything here is on this method, on turn async. You're going to hit this method on every turn of the bot, right? Every time the user says something, comes to your bot, you're going to hit this method, and then it's up to you what to do. And it's actually a little tricky on making sure that you're welcoming the user only on the first time, because the only way to make sure you're doing that is making sure that everybody who joins the chat room gets an ID, making sure you're getting a new ID, somebody new that you've joined, and then you can say, go send that welcome message. Now, notice how I can do other things. This one here, it kind of grabbed an image, and it put that image in my reply, and send it off as a content. Then it did more things like suggestions. Let's see. Let me close this guy so we can read more. Notice this guy here, the buttons that showed up, instead of just having a text conversation, I can say, go create this reply, which is a list of cards. Excuse me, and the cards can be anything that you define. This one is just a button, but it's nicer because I can just post back the value that the user clicks on, and then I can go from there. It's just a nicer experience. So just a super simple way of showing a button, and you can make more complex buttons. So let me show you one more example, and then that'll give you a better idea of some of the flows. So let's close this. Let's go to this one here. And let's fire this up. Okay, so this one is also ready. And let's do the feature bot. Okay, notice how, again, it does a welcome because it knows that I joined. Okay, tell me something, hello. It says, what's your name? Sam? Are you sure? And then, what's your age? Yes, I do want to give you my age because why not? I'm 20. I have your age as 20, sure? Yes, so that's a confirmation thing. And I say yes. And it says, I got your name, and I'm storing it. But it stops kind of right there. And then if I say something else, it kind of goes back to please enter your name, right? So this is an example of a conversation that you get to define, And conversations can be as simple or as complex as you make it. So essentially, you're defining a tree of how the conversation flows, and you have to account for like the back and forths. If the user says no, you go back. If the user says yes, so you define a flow chart essentially. So this entire thing is being defined by what's called the state of the bot. So in here, we have a couple of things. First is bots by nature are meant to be stateless, but if it's completely stateless, then every turn to the bot is a fresh request, and you can't make much of a conversation. So you have to store some state. So this one is just storing state in memory, but you can also store it in any database that you want. I'm storing the state and the name and the age that the user gave me. So these are my bot accessors, so I get to write some properties to disk. That's what I'm doing. And then if you look at this one here, notice the waterfall model that we're defining. This is the waterfall step. This is what defines what my bot does. So first ask for name, make sure name is good, ask for age, make sure age is good, and then summary. So for every one of those things, I have a method that does the corresponding thing. And at the end of it, it goes straight back up to the top, right? And this is where you get to define different types of branches and loops so your bot can do fancy things. Make sense? And all of these things are well defined through dialog sets. You can use Google's dialog set or Microsoft's dialog set. They all do the similar things. Waterfall step is just one of the things. You can do other different types of bot conversations, right? Any questions so far? We good? I am really running out of time, and Joe is going to kick me out. So let me switch gears and show you maybe a little bit more of cool stuff. Right? So again, bots are only as intelligent as we make it. So how do we make bots intelligent? Did I answer your question, by the way, ma'am? Sort of?
Sort of.
Let's talk more. Let me cover as much as I can in 15 minutes, and then I'm here. Oh, and by the way, before you leave the room, I have tons of stickers. We sell our souls for stickers, right? So I have Kendo UI and Telluric stickers.
Survey of the app first.
Yes, okay. Survey first. Okay, so how do we make our apps intelligent? Well, we can call into some services that make things easier, and I'm not advocating on like towards a specific service, but use whatever cloud service that you feel like using. In fact, if you're doing any type of .NET, then machine learning is actually built into .NET now. With ML.NET, they hit 1.0 as of like this past Monday. So if you are doing stuff on Azure, I mean, Azure obviously is a huge infrastructure that does a lot of different things. It's a big cloud infrastructure. But the thing that I'm really fond of is this little piece. It's called Azure Cognitive Services. To you and to me as a developer, it's just RESTful endpoints. I don't need to care about all of the machine learning and the AI models that are built behind the scenes. I get to just use it, right? And then I get to maybe customize it. So I just don't have to use it like as a dumb service. I can customize my Vision API to teach it things that it needs to say, or the speech API. So some of these things really light up, especially for bots, to make them a little more intelligent. So the UX is a little more smoother. So these are some ways in which bots can have a nicer UX, especially when talking to a human being. Q&A Maker. This is a super fun thing because turns out all of us have knowledge in our enterprises, right? And that knowledge sits out somewhere on a wiki, somewhere in an Excel spreadsheet, somewhere in a salesperson's head, you name it, right? So as long as you have some knowledge, you should be able to make a bot out of it fairly easily, right? It's almost trivial. LUIS is language understanding as a service. So I should be able to understand, you don't have to tell me the exact words. Your bot should be intelligent enough to tell me at least what you're trying to say, the crux of it, even if I'm not using the same words. Speech and vision. So these are all things that you can do to kind of light up your bots. So let's take a look. First thing, let's do Q&A Maker. Let's close this guy, and let's come back to the dashboard. Okay, so this is where I'm going to digress for 30 seconds, because I am a big fan of Audis. I've been driving Audis for a long time, and electric cars apparently are the future, because I'm trying to show you a demo of electric vehicles and some of the FAQs. Anyone here have a Tesla? No. Okay, well, Teslas are very cool. Teslas were kind of ahead of the game, and everybody else is learning how hard it is to make lithium-ion batteries at that kind of scale. So that's an SUV that Audi is coming out with. It's all electric, and they have an FAQ. So think about this as just about any FAQ, anything that you have on a public website or a file or a CSV, anything. So this is just an FAQ, and I want this FAQ to be accessible to my users as a bot, so I can just ask questions, right? So how do you do that? So you can go to Azure and you can create a Q&A maker, and it creates a cognitive service URL for you, and then it gives you a bot. So the bot actually has a few things built in. So let me go to qnamaker.ai. This, by the way, is the URL to access just the Q&A service. I'll give it a second. And this thing is actually fairly nice. So notice what they say, just copy, paste, and bot, take your bot to school. So you can actually start training your bot to respond to things more accurately, and then you can deploy them. And then if you go into create a knowledge base, sign in. Essentially what it says is point me to a URL or point me to a file that is your knowledge base, and then I'm going to go from there. This is my knowledge base. This is my e-tron knowledge base, and we'll give it a second to load up. But essentially what I did was I pointed it to this FAQ, right? So that's my knowledge base. That's what I want my bot to know. And essentially it's going to parse. If you give it a file, it's going to sit there for a couple of minutes and it's going to parse the whole thing, and it's going to try looking for questions and answers. That's what it's after, right? Questions and answers. Right? It's all about responding appropriately based on a certain question. All right, John Brister is watching maybe Netflix in the back, so my Wi-Fi is slow. Come on. While it's coming up, let me show you the actual bot. So this is the bot, and if I go into test the bot, notice how I have this little window here. So I can say e-tron models. And this service is connected to the bot, hopefully. Sending. My Wi-Fi is really slowing down now. Okay, I can switch to my phone if your Wi-Fi is dying. Okay. Yeah. Okay. We'll redo that. And we'll retry this again. So this came up. So essentially, you can't read it. It's too small. But essentially, what it says is, here's a question, and here's the answer, right? So if you ask it, what are the e-tron models, it's supposed to respond and say e-tron SUV and e-tron GT. E-tron GT is the Iron Man's supercar, which if you see Avengers Endgame, that's what he's driving. So that's my FAQ. And notice how I can get to define how the questions can be. It doesn't need to be exactly that question, because if this thing still didn't go. So let me try one more time. All right, maybe it's too slow to respond. But essentially the point is you should be able to ask a bot any variation of these questions, and you can also do more training. So you can say, if you ask any 5 or 6 of these different things, I'm going to respond with this, right? So you're essentially training your bot to do what you expect it to do. So let me show you one more thing here. Let's talk about, let's go back to Visual Studio, and I'll show you a cool demo here, hopefully, if the network works. In the meantime, let's look up maybe an image here. Okay, so let's grab this. And let's grab the URL, right? Let's see what the computer thinks this URL may be. So I'm going to go into my image caption bot. And launch it. So essentially what it's firing off is a service that's sitting in Azure. So it's calling into that service to say, can you make sense of this image? And turns out it's incredibly difficult for a computer to make sense of an image. But I mean, a lot of work has already been done. And you can also train it more so that it gets better with time. So if I pick the image caption here, notice how this bot says, hey, I can understand images. Give me an image or give me a URL. So I can type that URL in. And let's see what it says. maybe. It's doing something. Oh, there you go. I think it's a body of water with a city, which is fairly accurate, right? Right. So this is Azure telling you what that image is. This is Azure telling you what that question or what that answer is. So these are all services that you can use. One more fun thing that you can play around with is if I go into what is it called? Louis AI. This is language understanding. This is exactly what your at-home virtual assistants are doing, your Alexas, your Google Homes. So when I say, like, get me out of Orlando, what do I actually mean? Like, I'm out of home, I'm away from home, I'm looking to book a flight. So essentially, when you say things like that, the bot needs to understand what the thing is that you want to do. So it's called intent, right? What is it that you're trying to do? So book a flight is an intent. Order me 2 pizzas, that's a food order intent. Remind me to call, that's a calendar schedule. So these are the intents that your bot is trying to get to so it can do the right thing. And this is exactly what Alexa does. So every intent has multiple parameters that can come into it. So your bot understands what you're trying to do a little better, and you can speak to your bot like you would speak to a human. So if I go into this one here, just to kind of show you, no. Hang on, I wanted this other account. Six minutes. I got it. One last demo. Vision demo, we looked at that. Let's look at this Louis bot. Okay, so this one here, it's my Louis bot. Okay, so and what this is essentially is just a way for it to understand language. And let's see, where's my training or test? Okay, so what it's saying here is when you say hello, it knows that it's a type of greeting. So it has like 4 or 5 different intents that it understands. And when I connect that same service to my bot, let's see if this one would work now. Okay, so see, when I said bye, it knows that I have reached the cancel module or cancel intent, right? So essentially, the bot is trying to understand natural language, and it's trying to categorize what you're trying to say into a certain intent, so the bot can actually do something, right? And this is exactly, if you do any Alexa skills development, this is exactly what they do with like Amazon Lambdas. Azure does it with Azure Functions. This is all the same. They're trying to just parse what the user is saying and try to get to an intent and get the parameters out so that your bot can actually do something, right? So that's Louis and Q&A Maker. Let's go back. I have 4 more minutes left. So essentially, you get the idea that these are some things that make your app a little more intelligent, a little more human. So you can have a conversation with a bot, and it can do some concrete things before maybe you get to a human being, right? So it's all about cost cutting. If you have like a call center app, if you have like a scheduling app, think about all of these things that your bots can help with to kind of automate your workflows. So we looked at some demos of that. Now, one thing that we did, I got 3 minutes. I can maybe show you this really quick. So we are known for Telerik. That's the full suite of products that support .NET developers, all types of UI, and JavaScript developers across web, desktop, and mobile. And well, this is also Kendo UI, which is the JavaScript side of the family. So if you're building web apps, you can use Kendo UI. Bring your framework, it doesn't matter. We started out as jQuery, but now we make components for Angular, React, and Vue. So however you're writing your web apps, we got the UI for you. So we did this last year. It's called Conversational UI. And for the first time, we were able to do something that's across our entire portfolio of products, which is a lot of different things. Notice how we can do Kendo UI for all things web. I can do this from Xamarin mobile app. I can do it from a desktop WinForms or a WPF app. I can do it from anywhere. So what we are doing is just creating the UI in front of the bots, so developers get to build these bots a little quicker, and you don't have to spend the time creating the UI for it. So let me show you this real quick. I'm going to launch Visual Studio here. And while that's coming up, I'm going to get on another website. So if you head out to Telerik.com, that's all things that we build from this side of the family. And if you go to let's just say we do Kendo UI for jQuery. And we can go to demos, and we can do demos for every product type. And while this is coming up, let's launch this little app. So this is a Xamarin app that I'm showing you. Just to kind of show you a hint of what bots can actually do and what they can achieve in a big conversation. So this is going to be a form flow. That's a reminder that I need to get out soon. And this is the web side of things. And you can play around with these things just online without having to install anything. Sorry about my slow network. It moves much quicker if your network is responding quickly. Okay, so notice how I can do different types of bots. This one here is like an insurance bot. It can do insurance quotes for you. This one here is like a travel insurance or like a travel reservation bot, healthcare. These are things that bots are actually good at. Okay, so this, by the way, came up. This is the Xamarin app, right? So take a look at what bots can actually do for you. And it's pretty convincing when you see bots in action. So this is an app that you can actually download from the iOS, Android, or Windows stores. Let's go into travel assistance. Notice how it's connecting up to Azure, because we actually have a bot that's sitting in Azure. So it's trying to help you book a reservation. So family type vacation, little bobblehead, start date. So these are things we can do, like the calendars and things like that. We can throw in the pickers that people use. 5 days, how many people? 3. Where are we going? Spain, because why not? And next, what you're going to see is kind of an advanced version of the little cards that I showed you. It doesn't need to be just a simple button. It can be something as immersive as these things, which is taking a while to come up. But these are called little flashcards. So however you want to call it, you can have an image, you can have a text, and then you can just hit one button and you're done. So it's just a much more immersive experience for the user to kind of get out of your bot. So this kind of walks you through the whole thing. It's going to give you some more options about flights. Let's choose the most expensive one. And eventually it's going to be done. So think about all of these things that your bots can do, like travel, healthcare, call center. So all of these things can be lit up with bots. And I can show you the same exact demo from a WPF app, from a WinForms app, from all things web with React, Vue, Angular, or jQuery. So it's all the same UI that we render across all of our products. So that's pretty nice that we're able to do something that kind of stretches all through. So one last minute, other things to keep in mind as you're building bots are all of these things. As you kind of get in the groove of things, debugging is important. A lot of these things are kind of built into all of the bot frameworks, state management. Middleware is how you kind of log things on every request. Analytics, how people are using your bots. All of those things are kind of built into most bot frameworks, because these are things that your bot will need once you deploy your bots to production. So my last slide is, we are in an incredible time where we have all of this rich tooling for us to build amazing apps, right? And bots can be very smart, and they can actually do a lot of real things for you. So look into what your enterprises can benefit from bots. But otherwise, that's it from me, and thank you so much. Right? I'll hang around here.